I'm Clara, 32 female. I live alone in a city apartment that I worked incredibly hard to afford, managing financial portfolios for people who trust me to make smart decisions. I've always been the responsible one, the planner, the person my family called when they needed help untangling a problem. For years, I thought that was my role, my purpose within the family unit, but I was about to learn that my only real purpose was to be a resource they could exploit. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The restaurant was my mother's favorite, a noisy Italian place with checkered tablecloths and the overwhelming scent of garlic and oregano. It was the kind of place that prided itself on being authentically rustic, which was code for cramped and loud. For her 60th birthday, however, it was perfect. This was her element, surrounded by family, being the center of attention. I had arranged everything, from the reservation for 12 to the ridiculously expensive cake sitting in the restaurant's cooler. I did this every year for her birthday, for my brother Mark's birthday, for any family occasion that required more planning than just showing up. It was my unspoken job. I arrived a few minutes early, a habit ingrained in me from my career as a financial analyst, where a minute late could mean $1 million lost. The hostess recognized me and led me to the long table we'd reserved in the back. My cousin, Sophie, was already there, scrolling on her phone. She looked up and her face broke into a wide, genuine smile. Sophie was the only one in the family who felt like a true ally. We were the same age, had navigated the choppy waters of our family dynamics together, and often found ourselves exchanging knowing glances over the dinner table. "Hey you," she said, standing up for a hug. "You look great, stressful week." "You have no idea," I sighed, sinking into the chair beside her. "But it's Mom's big 6-0, I'm officially off the clock." Famous last words, she chuckled, and she had no idea how right she would be. The rest of the family trickled in over the next 15 minutes. My aunts and uncles, more cousins, and finally, the guests of honor. My mother, Diane, arm in arm with my older brother, Mark. His wife, Sarah, followed a few steps behind, holding the hand of their 7-year-old son, Leo. My mother glowed, soaking in the chorus of "Happy Birthday," as she made her way to the head of the table. Mark, ever the prince, pulled out her chair for her with a flourish. He had a salesman's charm that could win over anyone, a trait that served him well in his job as a sales manager at a luxury car dealership. It was a charm, I had learned, that often masked a deep-seated irresponsibility. "Clara, my darling girl," my mother said, her eyes finally landing on me. She blew me a kiss from across the table. "Thank you for putting all this together. You always know just what to do." I gave her a tight smile. "Of course, Mom, happy birthday." Mark caught my eye and gave me a nod. "Yeah, Clara, thanks, the place looks great." He then immediately launched into a story about a massive sale he'd closed that week, his voice booming over the chatter. Everyone at the table turned to listen, captivated. That was Mark's specialty, commanding a room. My contribution, the planning and the payment for the evening, was already a footnote. I was used to it. I was the reliable, quiet daughter. He was the dazzling, successful son. Our roles had been cast long ago. The dinner started as they always did. The adults ordered wine, the kids got sodas, and the conversation flowed around a few predictable topics: my uncle's latest health complaint, a cousin's recent engagement, and Mark's heroic performance at work. I mostly listened, chiming in when spoken to, feeling like a spectator at my own family gathering. Sophie would occasionally catch my eye and roll her eyes in solidarity, a small gesture that made the evening bearable. The tension, however, began to build when the topic of finances came up. My uncle started complaining about interest rates, which led my mother to sigh dramatically. "Oh, don't I know it," she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "Everything is so expensive these days. Thank goodness Mark is doing so well for himself. That new car of his is just beautiful, isn't it?" All eyes turned to Mark, who puffed out his chest. "Yeah, she's a real beauty. Top-of-the-line SUV. Had to have it for the family, you know? safety first. I bit the inside of my cheek. I knew for a fact that Mark couldn't have afforded that car on his own. His credit was a mess after a series of bad investments a few years back. The only reason he was driving that top-of-the-line SUV was because my name was on the loan right next to his. I had co-signed for him 3 months ago, after weeks of him and my mother begging me to do it. "It's for Leo," my mother had pleaded with me over the phone. "He needs a reliable car to get his son to school, to his games. You wouldn't want your nephew in some old clunker, would you? What if it broke down?" "His old car was fine, Mom," I had argued. "It was only 3 years old." "Clara, don't be difficult," she'd said, her voice turning sharp. "You're in a position to help your family. That's what family does. We help each other. You, with your big important job and your spreadsheets. This is nothing for you. For Mark, it's everything." Reluctantly, I had agreed. I laid out strict conditions. He was to make every payment on time, and the online account for the loan would be linked to my email so I would get a notification the second a payment was made or missed. He had agreed, full of promises and gratitude. "You're the best sister in the world, Clara," he'd said. "I'll never forget this." Sitting there at the dinner table, listening to him take all the credit, a familiar bitterness rose in my throat. I glanced at Sophie, who gave me a subtle shake of her head, a silent warning not to say anything. She knew about the loan. She was the only one I'd told. "Well, you deserve it, son," my mother was saying, reaching across the table to pat Mark's hand. "You work so hard for your family." The conversation moved on, but the lie hung in the air for me. The entire dinner felt like a performance. The happy family, the successful son, the doting mother, and me, the silent benefactor, the stagehand working behind the scenes to make sure the show went on. I pushed my pasta around my plate, my appetite gone. I had this sinking feeling, a knot of dread in my stomach that told me the performance was about to take a very ugly turn. I just had no idea how ugly it would get, or that the star of the next act would be a 7-year-old boy with a cup of soda. The main courses were cleared away, and the moment for the cake arrived. A pair of waiters carried it out, a massive tiramisu sheet cake with "Happy 60th Birthday, Diane," written in elegant chocolate script. Everyone erupted into the familiar, off-key rendition of "Happy Birthday." My mother clapped her hands in delight, her face beaming in the candlelight. For a moment, watching her genuine happiness, the resentment I felt began to soften. Maybe this was enough. Maybe being the silent support system was worth it for moments like these. After the song ended and my mother made a dramatic show of blowing out the candles, the waiters began cutting and distributing slices. My nephew, Leo, who had been getting progressively more restless, was practically vibrating in his seat. He'd already had 2 sodas and was now working on a third, the sugar coursing through his small body. "I want the corner piece," he demanded, pointing a sticky finger at the cake. "Leo, use your manners," his mother, Sarah, chided gently, but without any real force. Sarah was perpetually overwhelmed, a gentle soul who was no match for the combined force of Mark and Diane. As the waiter placed a slice of cake in front of me, Leo scrambled off his chair. He grabbed his half-full cup of dark soda and made a beeline around the table toward his grandmother. I was in his path, but I didn't think anything of it. I moved my chair in slightly to give him more room to pass behind me. He didn't pass. He stopped directly behind my chair. I felt a small presence and turned my head slightly to see what he was doing. And then it happened. I felt a sudden, cold wetness soaking through the back of my silk blouse and the seat of my new trousers. It was followed by the distinct fizzing sound of carbonation. "Oops," Leo said, but his tone wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. I gasped, the cold shock making me jolt forward. The entire back of my outfit was drenched. The dark, sugary liquid was already seeping uncomfortably against my skin. I twisted in my seat, looking down at the massive, dark stain spreading across the light gray fabric of my pants. "Leo," Sarah exclaimed, rushing over. "What did you do?" But before Leo could answer, he puffed out his little chest, mimicking his father's confident stance. and yelled, his voice high and piercing, "Grandma says you don't belong here." The chatter at the table, which had momentarily paused at the spill, came to a dead stop. Every single eye was on me. My face burned with humiliation. It wasn't just the words, it was the source. A 7-year-old doesn't come up with a line like that on his own. He was a parrot, and the words were his grandmother's. My mother's. I looked straight at my mother. Her face was a mask of surprise, but her eyes didn't hold shock. They held something else. A flicker of triumph. She quickly schooled her expression into one of maternal concern, but I had seen it. And then the worst part happened. My uncle, the one who always had a too much wine, let out a short, sharp laugh. It broke the tension like a gunshot. Another cousin chuckled, and then my brother, Mark, smiled. It wasn't a full-blown laugh, but a wide, smug grin that showed he was in on the joke. He caught my eye, and for a second his smile faltered as if he suddenly realized how this looked. But the damage was done. The table laughed. Not everyone, but enough of them. Sophie and her parents looked horrified. Sarah was trying to pull Leo away, her face pale. But the sound of that laughter, aimed directly at my humiliation, echoed in the silent restaurant. I felt like I was outside my own body, watching a scene from a terrible movie. The laughter, the sticky soda dripping down my back, the cruel, parroted words of a child, and my mother's false look of shock. It all coalesced into a moment of horrifying clarity. I didn't belong here. Not because I wasn't family, but because I wasn't part of their game. I wasn't a player. I was the game board they played on. I was the foundation they built their comfortable lives on, and they were laughing at the crack they had just made in it. My first instinct was to scream, to stand up and call them all out, to point at my mother and ask her what she meant, to look at my brother and demand to know why he found this so funny when my name on his car loan was the only reason he could even pretend to be successful. But I didn't. Some deeper, colder instinct took over. A part of my brain, the analytical part that I used every day at work, clicked into place. An emotional outburst was what they expected. It would make me the villain. "Clara is so dramatic," my mother would say later. "She can't take a joke." So I did the exact opposite. I took a deep breath. I reached for the linen napkin on my lap and calmly began to wipe at the soda on my trousers, a futile gesture that I knew wouldn't do anything. I didn't look at any of them. I focused on the dark stain, on the methodical movement of my hand. After a few moments of tense silence, I slowly lifted my head. I looked around the table, my eyes briefly meeting those of the people who had laughed. Then I looked at my brother and finally at my mother. I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a tight, controlled, empty smile that didn't reach my eyes. "It's okay," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It's just a spill. I'll just go to the restroom and get cleaned up." I stood up, my wet clothes clinging to me. I could feel the sticky residue on my skin. I could feel the weight of their stares. I didn't say another word. I just smiled that same, hollow smile and stayed quiet. I walked away from the table, my back straight, heading toward the restroom, the sound of my mother starting to scold Leo in a theatrical, for-show manner ringing in my ears. But as I walked, I wasn't thinking about my ruined clothes. I was thinking about a loan agreement, an online portal, and a single button that said "Remove Cosigner." And I knew, with absolute certainty, that tonight, the show was finally going to end. The ladies' room was small and thankfully empty. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My blouse, a cream-colored silk I'd saved up for, was ruined. A dark, ugly stain spread from my shoulder blade down to my waist, but it was my face that held my attention. My expression was one I'd never seen on myself before. The usual warmth in my eyes was gone, replaced by something cold and hard, like polished stone. The humiliation was still there, a hot flush on my cheeks, but underneath it, a quiet, furious resolve was beginning to crystallize. I did my best to clean up, dabbing at the stain with wet paper towels, but it was useless. The soda had already set in, a sticky, permanent reminder of what had just happened. Giving up, I just leaned against the counter, my hands gripping the cool porcelain, and took a few deep, shaky breaths. The door creaked open, and Sophie slipped inside, her face etched with concern. "Clara, are you okay?" she whispered, closing the door softly behind her. I just shook my head, unable to speak. A single tear escaped and traced a path down my cheek, hot and angry. "That was unbelievable," she said, her voice filled with disgust. "I cannot believe them. Your mom, Mark, just sitting there, and Leo. What kind of thing is that to teach a child?" "Heard it from his grandmother," I finally managed to say, my voice raspy. "That's what he said." Sophie's eyes widened. "He did, I couldn't hear him clearly. Oh, Clara, that is monstrous." She came over and put a hand on my arm. Her touch was warm and grounding. "What are you going to do? You can't just go back out there and pretend everything is fine." "I'm not," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I'm going to leave." "Good," she said immediately. "I'll come with you. We can make up some excuse." "No," I said, straightening up. I looked at her in the mirror. "You stay, enjoy the cake. Don't let them end the whole night for you. I'm just going to slip out. I'll text my mom later and say I wasn't feeling well." "Are you sure?" "Positive," I said. "I just need to be alone right now." She gave me a long, searching look, then nodded. "Okay, but you call me tomorrow, or tonight if you need to. I mean it, Clara." "I will," I promised. She gave my arm a final squeeze and left. I stayed in the restroom for another 5 minutes, composing myself. When I walked back out into the restaurant, I kept my head down, bypassed my table completely, and went straight to the front desk. I discreetly paid the entire bill for the party of 12, adding a generous tip for the waiters who had to witness my family's dysfunction. I wasn't going to give my mother or brother the satisfaction of thinking I'd stormed out and left them with the check. My exit would be clean, quiet, and on my own terms. The drive home was a blur. The cold fury that had started in the restroom was now a raging fire. "Grandma says you don't belong here." The words played on a loop in my head. Why? Why would she say that? I had done everything for them. I planned the parties, remembered the anniversaries, and provided the financial safety net they all took for granted. I co-signed for Mark's car. I helped my mother with a down payment on her condo after the divorce. I even had a separate savings account I mentally labeled Family Emergency Fund. And in return, I was told I didn't belong. When I got back to my apartment, I stripped off my ruined clothes and threw them in the trash. I took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away the sticky feeling of the soda and the even stickier feeling of betrayal. But it was no use. The humiliation was more than skin deep. After my shower, wrapped in a robe, I sat on my couch with my laptop. My hands were shaking slightly as I opened my web browser. I navigated to the website of the credit union that held the loan for Mark's precious SUV. I typed in my login credentials and the dashboard loaded, showing the loan details. Outstanding balance, $58,342. Next payment due, in 2 weeks. Payment status, current. So far, he had at least kept his promise to pay on time. I was about to start looking for the cosigner release forms when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from an unknown number. My brow furrowed. I picked it up and opened the message. "Hey Clara, this is Megan, Sarah's sister. I was at the dinner tonight with my husband. I just wanted to say that what happened was horrible and I'm so sorry. I hope you're okay." I was surprised. I barely knew Megan. We met a handful of times at family functions. I texted back a simple "thank you, I appreciate that." A minute later, another text came through from her. "I feel like you should know something. I overheard Mark and your mom talking before you got there. They were laughing about the car. Mark was saying how easy it was to get you to sign, calling you their personal bank. Your mom said, well, that's what she's for. She doesn't have a family of her own, so she should be helping ours. I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I thought you deserved to know what they say behind your back." I read the text once, then twice, then a third time. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the floor. The screen stayed lit, illuminating the cruel words. "Personal bank." She doesn't have a family of her own. That's what she's for. It all clicked into place. The casual cruelty, the lack of gratitude, the entitled attitudes. It wasn't just a moment of poor judgment at a birthday dinner. This was how they truly saw me. I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was a function, a resource. An unmarried, childless woman who, in their eyes, had nothing better to do with her money or her life than to fund theirs. The phrase, "you don't belong here," suddenly had a new, sinister meaning. I didn't belong at their table as an equal. I belonged in the background, a silent, open wallet. The fire of my anger burned away, leaving behind something much colder and heavier, the weight of the truth. The discovery was complete. The whispers, the jokes, the entitlement, it was all out in the open now. And as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, the path forward became brutally, unequivocally clear. They thought I was their personal bank. It was time to foreclose. The text message from Megan was the key that unlocked a door I never even knew existed. For the next 2 hours, I sat on my couch, not moving, just thinking. I replayed years of conversations, favors, and financial requests in my head. Every "Clara, could you just?" From my mother, and every "Sis, you're a lifesaver" from Mark was now cast in a new, predatory light. They hadn't been asking for help. They had been making withdrawals from their personal bank. The anger and hurt were still there, but my analyst brain had fully taken over. Emotions were a liability. I needed data. I picked my phone back up and sent a reply to Megan. "Thank you for telling me. It means a lot. Would you be willing to talk for a few minutes? I promise I won't put you in the middle of it." She responded almost immediately. "Of course, call me." I took a deep breath and dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. "Hi, Clara," she said, her voice soft and sympathetic. "Megan, thank you again. I just have one question. When you heard them talking, did they mention anything else? Anything specific about finances?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Actually, yes," she said, sounding hesitant. "It's why I felt I had to text you. Mark was bragging about how he'd be able to afford the down payment for their new house soon. Your mom said something like, 'Clara will help with that too, she just doesn't know it yet.'" Then they laughed. Mark said something about how your perfect credit was the gift that kept on giving. My blood ran cold. A house. They were already planning their next big withdrawal. This wasn't just about a car. This was a long-term financial strategy with me as the unwilling and unknowing primary investor. "Okay," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. That's all I needed to know. Thank you, Megan. Seriously, I won't forget this." "You take care of yourself, Clara," she said before hanging up. I put the phone down, my mind racing. The gift that kept on giving. My perfect credit score, which I had spent over a decade meticulously building, was something they viewed as a communal resource. I had to see how deep this went. My first stop was the loan agreement for the car. I pulled up the PDF I had saved on my computer. I read through every line of the fine print, something I should have done more carefully 3 months ago, but I had been too busy and had foolishly trusted my brother. As the cosigner, I was equally and fully responsible for the entire loan amount. If he missed a single payment, the credit union would come after me, and my credit score would take the hit. But then I found the clause I was looking for, cosigner release. The terms were strict. The primary borrower, Mark, had to make 12 consecutive on-time payments. After that, he could apply to have the cosigner released, but it was subject to a full credit review, and the lender had no obligation to approve it. There was, however, another section, voluntary cosigner withdrawal. This was far less common, but this particular credit union had a provision for it. A cosigner could petition to be removed from the loan at any time. If the primary borrower could not immediately refinance the loan on their own or provide a new acceptable cosigner, the loan would be considered in default. This would trigger an immediate repossession clause. It was a nuclear option, but it was an option. My finger hovered over the link to the online withdrawal form. Not yet, I told myself. First, more data. I had a shared family cloud account that my mom had insisted we all use to share photos of Leo. I rarely used it, but I suddenly remembered that Mark had uploaded some documents a while back when he was applying for a new phone plan and needed to send them from his computer to his phone at the store. He was notoriously sloppy with his digital footprint. On a hunch, I logged in. I clicked through the folders: vacation pics, Leo's birthday, Christmas 2024, and then I saw it, a folder simply labeled Docs. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked it open. Inside were scans of his recent pay stubs, his bank statements, and most damningly, a copy of the car loan application he had submitted. I opened the loan application. He had listed his income accurately, which I knew wasn't enough to secure the loan on his own. Then, I scrolled down to the section listing assets and liabilities. Under assets, he had listed a savings account with a balance of $15,000. I frowned. Where did he get $15,000? Mark lived paycheck to paycheck. His idea of saving was having enough left over for pizza on a Friday night. Then I opened his bank statements. I scrolled through months of transactions, my analyst eyes scanning for patterns. I saw his salary deposits, his rent payments, his wife Sarah's part-time salary from her job at a bookstore. And then I found it. A one-time deposit 4 months ago for exactly $15,000. The description was inheritance transfer, estate of Martha Riley. Martha Riley, my grandmother, our mother's mother. She had passed away 2 years ago. I remembered the funeral vividly. It was a sad, quiet affair. Grandma Martha hadn't had much, just a small house and a few $1,000s in savings. Her will had been simple. Everything was to be split 3 ways between her only daughter, Diane, and her 2 grandchildren, Mark and me. After selling the house and settling her affairs, my share had been about $25,000. I had put it directly into my retirement account. Mark, I was told, had received the same. But my mother had supposedly received nothing but my grandmother's personal effects. She wanted you kids to have the money, she had told us, tearing up. She knew I was fine, and she wanted to give you both a head start. We had been so touched by her selfless story, but looking at Mark's bank statement, I suspected it was a lie. If my mother had inherited a share, it would have also been around $25,000. What if she had given her share to Mark? It would explain the deposit, but why hide it from me? The answer was sickeningly simple. If I had known Mark had an extra $25,000, I never would have agreed to co-sign the loan for his ridiculously expensive car. I would have told him to use that money for a down payment on a more reasonable vehicle that he could afford on his own. They hid the inheritance from me so they could keep that money for something else. The house down payment Megan mentioned, while leveraging my credit for the car. They had orchestrated a deliberate, calculated financial deception. My mother had lied about her inheritance. She had funneled the money to her favored son, and then, in the same breath, had come to me, her personal bank, to secure the loan, crying poor and pleading for the sake of her grandson. The full scope of their betrayal was now laid bare, not in whispers or childish insults, but in black and white on my computer screen. Bank statements, loan applications, a hidden inheritance. This wasn't just a family being dysfunctional. This was fraud. Maybe not legally, but certainly morally. They had treated me like an outsider, a tool to be used, and had actively concealed information to manipulate me into taking on a massive financial risk for their benefit. I closed my laptop. The investigation was over. I had all the data I needed. The time for feeling hurt was over. The time for analysis was done. The next phase was about to begin. It was time to execute the plan. The rest of the night passed in a state of hyper-focused calm. The emotional storm had passed, leaving a cold, clear landscape in its wake. There was no more anger, no more tears. There was only the plan. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of peace and quiet, transformed into a command center. I sat at my dining table, my laptop open, a notepad and pen beside it. It felt just like preparing a major financial trade at work. Assess the situation, identify the assets, mitigate the risk, and execute with precision. My family was the volatile stock I was about to divest from, and I was going to do it so cleanly and efficiently that they wouldn't know what hit them until it was all over. First, the car. This was the centerpiece of the plan. It was the most visible symbol of their entitlement and my complicity. It had to be the first thing to go. I reopened the credit union's website. The voluntary cosigner withdrawal form was a simple, one-page digital document. It required my name, the loan number, my social security number for verification, and a digital signature. Below the signature box was a clear, concise statement. I understand that submitting this form constitutes a formal request to be removed as a cosigner. If the primary borrower is unable to secure alternative financing or provide a qualified replacement cosigner within 24 hours of notification, the loan will be placed in default, and the lender may exercise its right to repossess the collateral. 24 hours. It was an incredibly aggressive timeline, but it was the credit union's policy. I filled out the form, my fingers moving steadily across the keyboard. Name, Clara Evans. Loan number, 74B3888192. I typed in my social security number without hesitation. I paused for a moment at the digital signature line. This was the point of no return. I thought about the laughter around the dinner table. I thought about the words personal bank. I thought about my mother's hidden inheritance. I clicked the box, Clara Evans. Then I hit submit. A small green checkmark appeared on the screen. Your request has been received. A representative will contact the primary borrower on the next business day. The next business day was Monday. Tomorrow. I checked the time. It was 11:30 p.m. on Sunday night. The wheels would be set in motion in less than 12 hours. Mark would get a call in the morning. He wouldn't have a chance. No bank would refinance a $58,000 loan for someone with his credit score in a matter of hours. He had no replacement cosigner. I was his only option. The repossession was a certainty. I imagined the sleek, overpriced SUV being towed out of his driveway. A small, cold smile touched my lips. Step 1 was complete. Now for step 2, locking down my own finances. I was their personal bank, but the vault was about to be sealed permanently. I logged into my main bank account. I had set up overdraft protection for my mother's checking account years ago, linking it to my savings. It was supposed to be for emergencies. I had no idea how often she used it, but I wasn't taking any chances. I went into the settings and with 2 clicks, unlinked our accounts. The digital umbilical cord was severed. Next, I went through all my accounts, changing my passwords and adding 2-factor authentication tied only to my new cell phone number, which I planned to get tomorrow. I wouldn't put it past my mother to try and guess my passwords. She knew my dog's name, my favorite book, all the usual security question answers. Step 3 was about communication, or rather, the lack of it. I knew that as soon as the credit union called Mark, my phone would start blowing up. He would call, then my mother, then my aunts and uncles who had been roped into the drama. They would demand, plead, and guilt-trip me. I had no interest in participating in that conversation. So I blocked them. I went through my contacts list and one by one blocked Mark, my mother, and any other family member who had laughed or been complicit at that dinner. Their calls would go straight to voicemail. Their texts would never be delivered. I left Sophie and a few other neutral parties unblocked. I would need a channel to the outside world, but it would be on my terms. The final step was the most difficult, but also the most necessary. It was about creating a new narrative. They had painted me as the family utility. I needed to redefine myself, not just to them, but to myself. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. I opened a new document and began to write. It wasn't a letter I ever intended to send, but I needed to get the words out. I detailed everything: the hidden inheritance, the personal bank comments, the years of one-sided support, and the final, humiliating scene at the birthday dinner. I wrote down how it made me feel, used, foolish, and invisible. Putting it all into words was cathartic. It solidified my resolve. This wasn't a rash decision made in anger. It was a logical conclusion, based on overwhelming evidence. When I was done, it was nearly 2 a.m. My apartment was silent. The plan was in motion. The digital dominoes had been pushed. All I had to do now was wait for them to fall. I felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about their problems, their needs, their next manufactured crisis. I was thinking only of myself. I shut my laptop and went to bed. I fell asleep faster than I had in months, with no dreams. I was awakened not by my alarm, but by the first buzz of my phone at 7:45 a.m. It was a text from Sophie. "Holy cow, Clara, what did you do? Mark is losing his mind." I smiled, stretching under the covers. The show was starting, and I had the best seat in the house. I was just about to text her back when a loud, insistent knocking echoed from my front door. It was sharp and frantic. Bang, bang, bang. 8 a.m., right on schedule. I got out of bed, pulled on my robe, and walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. It was Mark, his face red and contorted with fury. Behind him, on the verge of tears, was my mother. The confrontation was here. I took one more deep, cleansing breath, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door. I opened the door, and the sight was exactly as I'd pictured. My brother, Mark, stood there, practically vibrating with rage. His face was blotchy, his hair was a mess, and he was still in the polo shirt he'd probably slept in. My mother, Diane, stood just behind his shoulder, her face a mess of tears and disbelief. Her performance had already begun. "Clara, what did you do?" Mark yelled, his voice cracking. He tried to step into my apartment, but I didn't move. I stood firm in the doorway, my hand on the door, blocking his entry. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Mark," I said, my voice as calm and flat as a frozen lake. This was the key. No emotion, just facts. "Don't play dumb with me," he spat. "The credit union called. They said you pulled your name off the loan. They're coming for the car, Clara. They're going to take my car." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said, my tone unwavering. My mother pushed past him, her hands clasped together in a pleading gesture. "Clara, honey, please, this has to be a mistake. You have to call them and fix this. Mark needs that car. It's for Leo, for your nephew." This was the line she always used, the one that had always worked. The appeal to family, the weaponizing of a child's needs, but it had lost its power. "No, Mom, it wasn't a mistake," I replied, looking directly into her eyes. "It was a very deliberate, very calculated decision." Her face crumpled. "But why? Because of that silly little thing last night? Leo is just a child." He was repeating something he must have misheard. It was a joke. "A joke," I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "Was it also a joke when you told Mark I was your personal bank? Was it a joke when you decided that since I don't have a family of my own, my only purpose is to finance yours? Was it a joke when you hid your inheritance from me and funneled it to Mark so you could manipulate me into co-signing this loan?" The color drained from my mother's face. Mark's jaw went slack. They stared at me, utterly speechless. They had been caught. Their private conversation, their secret little conspiracy, was out in the open. How did you?" my mother stammered. "It doesn't matter how I know," I said, my voice dropping to a low, cold whisper. "All that matters is that I do know. And now that I know what my real role in this family is, I'm officially resigning from my position." Mark found his voice again, but the rage was gone, replaced by a desperate panic. "Clara, come on, it wasn't like that. We were just... You know how Mom talks. You can't do this. My job. I need that car for my job. I could get fired." "You should have thought of that before you used me," I said. "You have options. You can use the $25,000 Grandma Martha left for Mom to put a down payment on a car you can actually afford." "Oh, wait," I said, tapping my chin in mock thought. "You probably already spent that on something else, didn't you? Planning for that new house, I bet." Mark looked like I had physically struck him. He was completely exposed. "This isn't fair," my mother wailed, the tears now flowing freely. "Family is supposed to help each other. We are your family, after everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You have done nothing but take from me. You have taken my money, my time, my energy, and my good credit. And in return, you have given me disrespect and humiliation. You have taught your grandson that I am someone to be mocked. You have told him I don't belong. And you know what? You're right, I don't belong. Not in this toxic, manipulative, one-sided relationship you call a family. From inside my apartment, I heard my phone buzz again. It was on the entry table. Mark's eyes darted towards the sound. Is that them? Is that the tow truck? He asked, his voice shaking. I don't know, I said honestly. But your time is running out, Mark. You were given 24 hours to secure new financing. You've probably got about 2 hours left. I suggest you stop wasting your breath yelling at me and start making some phone calls. I began to. Close the door. My mother put her hand out to stop it. Clara, no, don't shut us out. We can talk about this. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, looking from her to my brother. The bank is closed. My accounts are sealed. Your access has been permanently revoked. Mark's desperation turned back to anger. You'll regret this. You'll be all alone. Who are you going to have when you get old? No husband, no kids, and now no family. It was a cruel, low blow designed to hit my deepest insecurities. And a year ago, it would have shattered me. But now, it was just noise. I would rather be all alone, I said, looking him dead in the eye, than be used by people who are supposed to love me. I'll take my chances. And with that, I closed the door on their shocked faces. I turned the deadbolt, the solid thunk echoing in the sudden silence of my apartment. I leaned my back against the door, my legs feeling a little weak. I could hear them on the other side, my mother starting to sob loudly, my brother kicking the door once in frustration before shouting my name again. I didn't answer. I just stood there, listening to them, until eventually, their voices faded as they retreated down the hallway. The confrontation was over. I had stood my ground. I had spoken the truth. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't cried, I hadn't let them manipulate me. I had simply presented the facts and stated my position. My phone buzzed again. This time I picked it up. It was another text from Sophie. Just got a frantic call from your aunt. Apparently, the tow truck just arrived at Mark's house. The whole neighborhood is watching. He's trying to block it with his other car. This is insane. A slow smile spread across my face. It was done. The consequences were real and they were happening right now. The car was gone. The loan was defaulted. His credit was shot. My name was cleared. I walked over to my window, which overlooked the city, and watched the morning traffic flow by. The sun was shining. For the first time in a very long time, I felt light. I felt free. The hardest part was over, and the rest of my life was just beginning. The days following the confrontation were a strange mix of chaos and silence. The chaos was external, a storm raging at a safe distance. My phone remained blissfully quiet from the family members I had blocked, but Sophie acted as my reluctant intelligence officer, feeding me updates. Mark's car had indeed been repossessed in a very public and embarrassing spectacle. He had, as predicted, lost his job. Apparently, driving a top-of-the-line model from their inventory was an unwritten requirement for a sales manager at his luxury dealership. Showing up in his wife's 10-year-old sedan was not an option. The fallout was immense. My mother, according to my aunt, had taken to her bed, grief-stricken by her daughter's betrayal. She was painting a dramatic picture to anyone who would listen, casting me as a cold, heartless monster who had destroyed her son's life over a childish prank. Some family members bought it, sending me angry voicemails that I never listened to, from numbers I promptly blocked. Others were silent, clearly not wanting to take a side. But the silence in my own life was profound and deeply peaceful. There were no more panicked Sunday evening calls from my mother about a bill she couldn't pay. No more wheedling texts from Mark about a can't-miss investment opportunity he needed a few $100s for. The constant, low-grade hum of their needs, which had been the background noise of my entire adult life, had simply stopped. I hadn't realized how much energy it consumed until it was gone. I felt like I had been carrying a massive, invisible weight for years, and had suddenly been allowed to set it down. About a week later, I received a letter in the mail. It was a formal notification from the credit union stating that I had been successfully released from all obligations related to the loan. Seeing it in writing was a final, satisfying confirmation. I shredded the letter and threw it away. That same day, I got a call from Sarah, Mark's wife. I hadn't blocked her number, and I was hesitant to answer, but my curiosity got the better of me. "Clara," she said, her voice small and tired. "Hi, Sarah. I just wanted to call and say, I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "For everything. For what Leo said, for how Mark and Diane treated you. You didn't deserve any of that." "Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that," I said, surprised by her sincerity. He's a mess," she continued. "He lost his job, and we're going to have to sell the house we were saving for, maybe even move into a smaller apartment. Everything is falling apart." She wasn't saying it to guilt me, it was just a statement of fact. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. I had never wanted to harm her or Leo. They were just collateral damage in a war started by my mother and Broth. "No, don't be," she said quickly. "Honestly, Clara, this might be the best thing that could have happened. For years, I've watched him and his mom rely on you for everything without a shred of gratitude. It made him weak. It made him entitled. Now he has to face the real world. Maybe he'll finally grow up. I'm taking Leo and we're going to stay with my parents for a while. Mark needs to figure this out on his own." I was stunned. "Wow, Sarah, that's a big step." "It's long overdue," she sighed. "Anyway, I just wanted you to know that I don't blame you. You did what you had to do, and I hope one day you'll be happy." We ended the call, and I felt a pang of sadness for her, but also a sliver of hope. Maybe this crisis would force them all to change for the better, but I also knew it wasn't my problem anymore. A few months passed. The seasons changed. I excelled at work, receiving a promotion and a significant bonus. I started using my family emergency fund for its new purpose, the Clara's Life is Awesome Fund. I took a solo trip to Italy, a place I'd always dreamed of visiting. I ate pasta in Rome, explored art in Florence, and drank wine in Tuscany, all without a single thought about whether my mother had paid her electric bill. The most significant change, however, was in my relationships. My bond with Sophie grew stronger than ever. She became the sister I always should have had. We had weekly dinners, went on weekend trips, and supported each other unconditionally. Megan, Sarah's sister, also reached out again, and we met for coffee. We discovered we had a lot in common, and a new friendship began to bloom. My definition of family was changing. It was no longer about blood or obligation. It was about mutual respect, support, and love. It was about people who showed up for you, who told you the truth, and who wanted the best for you without wanting anything from you. One evening, about a year after the infamous birthday dinner, I was at home, enjoying a quiet night in, when my phone rang with an unblocked, unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Hello." "Clara," the voice was hesitant, frail. It was my mother. I was silent for a moment. "What do you want?" I just wanted to," she started, then her voice broke. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I was so wrong, I miss my daughter." I listened as she cried, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity either. I just felt a distant sadness, the kind you feel for a stranger's misfortune. She had lost her son's perfect life, her comfortable status, and her financial safety net. She was only calling me now because she had run out of other options. "I hear you," I said finally, my voice gentle but firm. "But an apology doesn't erase years of being treated like a bank account. I'm happy now, Mom. I've built a life for myself, a real one, with people who value me for who I am. I can't go back to the way things were." "I don't want to go back," she insisted. "I want to move forward. Can't we just try?" "Goodbye, Mom," I said softly, and I hung up the phone. I didn't block her number this time. The call hadn't unsettled me. It had clarified things. Her apology wasn't for me, it was for her. And I was no longer in the business of making her feel better. My family was now Sophie and Megan and the wonderful friends who filled my life with joy. My family was something I was building, not something I was born into and burdened by. And in this new family, I knew without a doubt I truly belonged.